Hey, what's up, class? Professor Calderon here. All right, I want to go over screenwriting. So, we have to write a script, but you're going to write a short. But despite that, you need to understand the structure of a feature length script. So, the short is just a one act or the feature in miniature. It has a beginning, a middle, and the end. Okay. Now the feature is, excuse me, much more in depth, much more detailed. You can cover more ground. All right, so here we go. First, you start with your film idea and you write it down if you have not already. You gotta free and feed your creativity. Throw some music on, exercise, do whatever you gotta do, shoot some pool, basketball, whatever you do to get your creative juices flowing, do it. Okay? And you gotta make it a practice. You gotta do it regularly. Right. Next thing you gotta answer is this: is it a story or is it a message? Okay? Because I get a lot of students when I ask them what kind of movie you want to make, and they'll say something like, "Well, I want to make a movie." Oh, here's a good example. In my foster youth lab, one of the young students, she said she wanted to make a movie about the inequalities or the injustices that foster youth have to endure. And I told her, okay, that's a worthy cause, but it's not a story. And she was, for months, we went back and forth and very adamant about this, right? And so finally, one day she came to me and she says, I think I got it. I think I finally understood what you're saying. I said, all right, explain. Let's hear it. And she said, opening shot. It's a rundown house. It's nighttime, 3 in the morning. The room is filthy, dirty, graffiti on the walls, drug paraphernalia on the floor, a dirty mattress, and on the dirty mattress is a 6-year-old child. And the child gets up and makes his way to the hallway where we see drug addicts passed out, needles on the floor. The child goes to the refrigerator in the kitchen. Everything is just moldy, nasty, just filthy. The kid makes it outside, 3 in the morning. There's some drug dealers out there. They don't even care. They don't even look. So the kid's walking down the street, makes it to the corner liquor store, and the guy behind the counter, just as he sees the kid walk in, and just as he looks down and says, "What are you doing here?" Two guys bust in the door and rob the liquor store at gunpoint. And I said, wow, what? Like, this is great. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Where is this coming from? And she told me I was that child. That was a story. That was something that happened to her. So she took her real life experiences and extrapolated that into a story, right? Because our life is a story. So it has to be a story, not a message. I gave you these 6 questions. Hopefully, you've answered them and you're ready to sort of move on to the next thing. If not, you want to pause this now and answer these 6 questions. I'll give you a second to do that. And I'm going to the next one. Okay, now we engage in the craft of screenwriting. So, screenwriting was introduced to me at the American Film Institute, where I studied and I got my master's degree. And when you go to AFI, you're exposed, you're shown how to do the whole production process from all 5 phases. And then you have to choose which emphasis you want to sort of dive into. So screenwriting was my emphasis, and I felt like I had already directed like 4 plays. I've already produced So my friend John Singleton, who was a director and writer, he told me if you want to make it in Hollywood, you got to be a good writer. If it's not on the script, it won't be in the screen. If it's not in the script, it won't be on the screen. I'm sorry. So you have to understand that screenwriting is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a long haul game. You don't just whip out a full script in one weekend. I mean, you can try it, you can do it, you can probably even make it to page 100, but it's going to be terrible. It's going to just be so bad, and you're going to get excited about it simply on the merit that you wrote a script. But if you start circulating around writers who really know the craft, they'll tell you this is terrible. And it's obvious that you didn't spend the time with it because it's a marathon. It's a long run, and it requires a lot of thinking, a lot of planning. It requires a lot of rewriting. You know, you write something down, you get to page 100, you give it to someone for feedback, someone who knows what they're talking about, you know, another writer. You don't give it to your cousin because he's going to tell you, oh, this is great. You don't give it to grandma because anything you do, grandma's going to love. You give it to somebody who's going to critique the heck out of it, who's going to tell you what's wrong with it and why, so you can fix it. Okay? So plan on rewriting at least a minimum of 5 drafts. Your 5th draft is the one that you call your first draft. Because when the industry gets that script, if there are mistakes in it, they won't even read it. If they get to page 5 and it's like full of just cliches and just things, they're not even going to read it. They're just going to pass. Matter of fact, no producer or director is going to read it. They're going to give it to an assistant somewhere, a script reader, which is what I used to do. And they do coverage. And they advise pass or no pass. Because you got to remember, in Hollywood, there are thousands and thousands of new scripts every day. And everyone's got a script. You can walk in any Starbucks in Los Angeles and say, is there a screenwriter in the house? And you're going to get at least 5 people. I know how to write a screenplay, right? So, but the problem is, they think that, well, just because I can write a screenplay. And that's not the case. Right. So, plan on rewriting. Conflict is drama. You have to learn how to sustain conflict in every aspect of your script. Okay? The next thing is stay away from cliches. A cliche is the enemy in film. Right? A cliche is something that we've seen before over and over and over again. It's become a trope, and you do not want them in your movie. They are lazy. Okay? It's a way of bypassing the work. Cliche is the enemy. You always want to use screenwriting software. Okay? Software, not a Word template. There are templates out there where you can just cut and paste stuff in there. Don't use those. Pay the money to get the software. I think the cheapest one I seen was called writersduet.com, and it's very cheap. I think it's something like $6 a month or $10 a month, and you can put several projects in there. The industry standard software is Final Draft, and you can get a copy of it as a student with a discount. So Final Draft is the industry standard that they use. Now, you want to use software because the script has to be formatted properly. Because if it's not formatted properly, it'll never make it to the next phase. Okay? If you have a script that's not formatted properly and you give it to someone who's professional, they're not even going to read it. They're going to look at it and think, if this person doesn't even have the time to learn how to format a screenplay, what makes them think that I'm going to read their unformatted screenplay when they couldn't even get across the first hurdle and learn that they have to use a software? So you definitely want to use software. No typos. None. Every time you have a typo, it just chips away at your credibility as a writer. You know, if I'm reading your script and on page 1 I see a typo, oh man, every word for me that I read after that typo is going to be tedious. Literally. Because I will not be able to get over that single typo. I'll be like, how in the heck did this person turn in a script with a typo? Look at that. And it's just going to jar the whole experience. Okay? You want to give it to someone, let them proofread it. Give it to someone else and let them proofread it. Right? Proofread, proofread, proofread. Your page count, no more than 100 pages. If you get it under 90 pages, that's wonderful, because each page equals a minute to a minute and a half of screen time. So 90 pages is a 90-minute script. Okay, do the math. All right. Now you need to master your genre. What genre do you like? You need to go and research that genre. I have a class where I explore film genres at West LA. It's a wonderful class, and we dive deep into each genre. Now you have to master the genre, because if you tell people, hey, this is a Western coming out, right? And you don't have any cowboys or Indians, it's going to be one bad premiere, right? If you say this is a gangster movie and there's no gangsters, right? Then yeah, you got problems. So each genre has its expectations. You know, when people go and see a sci-fi movie, they expect certain things. And a lot of the things they expect are not obvious. Okay? Some of the things that happen unnoticed, but they're still expected. Like if it wasn't there, then you would notice. But because it's there, you don't notice. You just see a good film. So you need to research what are the expectations within your genre. Okay? Next, you want to protect your work. Always, always. Copyright it with the Library of Congress. I think it's $25. And then you register it with the WGA registration. And that's at WGA.org with the Writers Guild Association. I think that's $20. Okay? You do not do the poor man's copyright where you put it in an envelope and mail it to yourself and don't open it. That doesn't work. Pay the money to protect your work. Get it copyrighted. There's nothing worse than someone stealing your idea. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, and you don't want it to happen to you. All right? Copyright and register your script. Okay, so the 3-act structure is the most dominant structure in cinema around the world. It addresses the basic needs so that when the audience leaves that theater, they feel like they've had a full cinematic experience. So the minimum you need is 3 acts. There are more. You can have 4 acts, 5 acts, 6 acts, 7 acts. Okay? But I would suggest you stick with the 3-act first. You have to learn how to crawl before you try to walk, and then you have to learn how to walk before you try to run. Master the 3-act structure, and then move on to 4 acts, 5 acts, 6 acts. Okay? Now here is the structure of the act. The first unit and the smallest unit is the beat. Okay? The beat is the turning of action and reaction that characters have in the movie. One character says something or does something and it puts things in a positive mode. And then the other character says something and it takes it to a whole nother direction. That's a beat. Beats make up the scene. You have 5, 6 beats more. That becomes a scene. Okay? The scene also turns on itself, from positive to negative, negative to positive. All right, 3 or 4 scenes equals the sequence. A sequence is a collection of scenes, and the sequence as well as a unit turns from positive to negative or negative to positive. You get 3 sequences. Now you have the act, and the act goes from positive to negative or negative to positive. So you have the act, which can be broken down into sequences. You have the sequences that are broken down into scenes, and then you have the scenes that are broken down into beats. And that is the 3-act structure. If you have 4 acts, then the 4 acts will have beats, scenes, and sequences as well. Okay? And it will also turn from positive to negative or negative to positive. That's the 3-act structure. At the core of all this is this concept of the story dynamic. And this is important. This is critical. This is what keeps us glued, all right? The story dynamic determines the up and down emotions our audience will experience as they watch your movie, okay? It is an ever-changing emotional charge that takes us through the line of the story. It makes up the through line of the story. The through line of the story is that main narrative focus, of that main protagonist, not the ancillary B characters, but the main characters. And that emotional charge goes through the entire story. Everything that happens will either push the charge to the positive or the negative, right? What do I mean by that? Okay. If, let's say I win the lottery, that's a positive. Let's say I go collect my winnings, right? And on the way home, I get robbed and I lose the money, right? That's a negative. So the story dynamic and everything you write will continuously push that dynamic, those emotions from positive to negative and back to positive and back to negative. It never goes positive to positive or negative to negative. It has to keep changing dynamically. Okay? And to manipulate this charge, you absolutely need to know what your protagonist values. Because human beings perk up whenever we recognize human values are at risk. It's an evolutionary trait, right? It's called entropy. And it's the second law of thermodynamics. As time progresses, everything falls into discord. And based off of evolution, we are primed to notice this breakdown. And when it breaks down, we perk up because we don't want to be part of it. Okay? It's like, oh man, this thing is falling down. Get out, right? We perk up and we do something about it. So when you know that you're watching a protagonist and something they value, like life, is at risk, the question becomes, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this? Their life is being threatened, right? If they value their job, then their job will be threatened. If they value their family will be threatened, okay? So you have to know what your protagonist values in life, and then you attack it. So that charge must flow from positive to negative. At the top of the beat, what is the charge? It could be either way, positive or a negative. Whatever it is, you have to make sure that at the bottom of the beat, it's the opposite of the beginning, okay? And the exchange should go from action to reaction. Action, reaction. Something happens, an event, and then your protagonist reacts to that event. The event can take it from a positive to a negative or a negative to a positive, and then your protagonist reacts in the face of that value going from positive to negative or negative to positive. And that keeps the audience asking, oh my God, what comes next? All right, we went over the beat. Okay, event. I just mentioned this. An event has to happen. An event is something that changes the character's situation. It changes the value, right? Something they value is now threatened. And that is conflict. Because if that value is threatened, right, there's discord. Now they need to put out energy to bring order to that discord. But the antagonist is standing in their way. They cannot bring order. They cannot restore order to their life until the antagonist is dealt with. And the antagonist can be a person, right? It can be a place or a thing. Okay? A person, a place, or a thing. So, there's this movie called Midnight Cowboy with Dustin Hoffman. And the whole entire city of New York is the antagonist. He's struggling to make it in New York. The sequence, 2 to 5 scenes. The final scene is the sequence climax. And it has far more impact than the preceding scenes. So scene 1, the intensity could be like at a level 3. Scene 2, the intensity could be like a level 4. And then scene 5, or I say scene 3, the final scene could be an intensity level 10. Okay? There should be this upward trajectory in the stakes. You don't put the high stakes up first, right? You don't put the first scene and the intensity is 10, because now it's going to go downhill and people are going to lose interest, right? You have to have the stakes constantly rising. More and more and more is at risk, okay? And then each scene needs to turn on that positive to negative or negative to positive value, that charge. The act, the sequences come together to make the act. And then the final scene causes irreversible change. It's a major shock to what your characters value. And the final scene is more powerful than any scene before it, right? And so, just like we had mentioned before, you have that story dynamic in the act. Okay, so the act starts on one charge and ends on an opposite charge, and the conflict is constantly rising, the stakes. So you design your 3 acts in a way that the final act brings everything to a climax. It's the big fight. It's called the obligatory scene. Okay? If, let's say you're writing a movie about let's say Rocky, okay? The movie Rocky, the whole time, what is he doing? He's preparing for the fight with the champ. He's the underdog, right? So if you never see that fight between him and Apollo Creed, the whole movie falls. So that fight becomes the obligatory scene. It's the final act climax, okay? That's why you always see all hell break loose in the last 20 minutes of a movie. It's the final act, and they have to release the Kraken, so to speak. The scene, the beats, the emotional charge is dynamic, and you have to constantly ask what value is at risk in each beat, each scene. What is the significant change? What is the event? Is it an event? Because events have to happen to your character in a way that it affects what they value, and it puts things at risk. Okay, so every scene has to be an event. As the writer crafts each beat, the stakes should go higher and higher and build to the final act. And the charge should go back and forth, positive to negative, leaving them in the final act with that rising conflict coming to the ultimate head. So the plot. Plotting is essential to storytelling. Okay? You're only telling the essential moments needed to move the narrative forward. If it doesn't move the narrative forward, you don't need it. For example, every morning, pretty much everybody in America wakes up and brushes their teeth. Okay? In your film, we do not need to see your character wake up and brush their teeth unless the toothpaste is poisoned. You feel me? If we see that the toothpaste is poisoned, then yes, we need to see your character brush their teeth. Why? Because that changes the value. Their life is at risk now. They've been poisoned. If they're just brushing their teeth to brush their teeth, get rid of it. It does nothing for the plot. So the mundane things that we do in life, we leave it out, right? We don't need to see them brush their teeth unless the toothpaste is poisoned, okay? So then you ask, does it serve the story? If so, how? Well, yeah, dang, the toothpaste is poisoned. His life is at risk, all right? If it's not poisoned, cut it. Because then it's usually exposition. And exposition are the little facts that the audience needs to know to understand the plot. Like if they don't know that the toothpaste is poisoned and the character brushes his teeth, takes a couple steps and drops dead, how would they know what happened? Right? But if they see the toothpaste is poisoned and then he brushes his teeth and then drops dead, they know, snap, someone's poisoned him. There's a mystery here. He's been murdered. All right? It's not a stroke or a heart attack. He's been murdered. So you must expose the exposition through conflict. You have to let the forces of conflict crack the exposition open, revealing it through the natural means of life. It has to flow out naturally. It can't just be like someone coming in the living room saying, hey, you know that toothpaste is poisoned, right? That's exposition. But if you show the toothpaste being poisoned, right? You show them conflicted. I'm going to poison them. No, don't do it. You can't do it. You know, think about your family. They're going to catch you and they're going to put you in jail and blah, 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 right? He's conflicted about the poison, but he does it anyway, right? There was conflict that forced the exposition out. So in Act 1, you establish the protagonist and their world. You want to show what life looks like when everything is normal. That doesn't necessarily mean what life looks like when everything is good, right? Because you can start off the movie on a negative note and leave it on a positive note, right? With a nice Hollywood ending. So you want to show what life is like on a normal day, and you want to set it up quick and set it up in a way that sort of relates to the upcoming conflict that you're about to release, the upcoming chaos. Like if you're going to threaten their life, then show how much they love and enjoy life. Okay? So that the audience gets a sense that they're really losing something. Not just, the breath, but this person's really enjoying life and they're about to lose it. That's tragic. And then the first act has what's called the inciting incident. And the inciting incident is that one major event that literally turns their world upside down. And from this one event, there is no going back. This is like in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy and Toto get sucked up into the tornado and they land in the land of Oz, right? There is no going back. The only way out is to go forward. And she has to figure it out. That's how you want to end your act. There is no going back. They've been forced to the point of no return, and now they have to take action to make it right. So they have to take action. They have to adjust. They have to solve how am I going to make things normal in this new reality? What action is called for them to take? Okay, you don't want your protagonist to be passive, meaning things just happen to them. This is called Deus Ex Machina, the God in the machine. And it's a cop-out, right? It's putting the blame on an unseen God that doesn't exist, right? When that's boring. We want to see, just like life, right? People have consequences for their actions. They're forced to take actions, and that has a cause and effect in their life. And that cause and effect takes them on this journey, and it's shifting the dynamic from positive to negative or negative to positive. And then you illustrate the protagonist's struggle to undo the consequences of the event in Act 1 that turned their world upside down. Okay? And you think that they're getting closer to solving it, and that right up at the end of the second act, another major event happens, and it takes them even further away from where they wanted to go. Okay? That's called writing from the gap. They say, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, that'll solve it. So when the character struggles and does X, Y, and Z, instead of solving it, it had a whole other effect that ended up being worse than the first one. And now they're in an even worse position. Okay? So there's a second major reversal. Act 3, now your protagonist has to adjust again. Because the stakes are like at an all-time high now. Right? And this is where they have to meet these demons face to face. You know, the audience is asking, oh my God, do they have the energy to recover from this? So this is also where something that was hidden comes to light. For example, in Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker's fighting Darth Vader and has been for like the whole time. And right at the third act, Darth Vader tells him, you can't kill me, Luke. And Luke is like, why? He says, I'm your father. Oh my gosh, he's my father. Can you imagine? You trying to be an honest guy, and then you find out the most sinister man in the galaxy is your father, right? And he's like, come join me and we'll rule the galaxy together. The Empire. All right. So, in light of all this, does the protagonist win or lose at the end of Act 3? And if they win or lose, what are the consequences? What are the consequences of that? We need to see that. And then you also have to tie up all the unanswered questions that you've opened up in the movie. You ever leave a movie and you kind of wonder, like, whatever happened to this character? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. They just kind of, I don't know. They just did something and you never heard about them again. So you have to find a clever way through the craft of conflict to tie up all these unanswered questions. As I mentioned before you start writing, you got to write copious amounts of backstory for each character, all the major characters. You have to write down the character arc, how they begin, and then how they end, and there has to be a change to that. You need to write down the rules of the world your character lives in, and then you also need to know what is that hidden secret that's going to come out in the third act and how it'll affect everything. Once you have that, you talk to somebody. Hey, this is my idea. What do you think about this? Blah, 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 blah. Talk to someone in the class. on the discussion board. Post it. And then when you post yours, comment on someone else's. Give them some honest feedback. Once you've done that, then you're ready to outline. Scene by scene, you write 2 or 3 sentences describing the action. Use index cards. One scene, one index card. Or one beat, one index card. However you want to do it. I use color-coded index cards. So, like, I can say my red cards are Act 1, my green cards Act 2, the white ones Act 3, and do stuff like that. Then you can reorder the scenes. I lay them out on the floor, and I can reorder them to see how the movie plays if this scene went before that scene, or this scene went here, or maybe this scene is here. Maybe it's a non-linear story, right? Maybe the end of the story happens in the beginning. And then I go back and tell the whole thing, like Pulp Fiction. So you have to identify these things in the outline. And then once you've done the outline, you have to memorize it and then distill it down to a pitch. The process of memorizing and distilling down to a pitch helps you identify your own story holes. And plus it commits it to the memory so that when you get in front of an executive, you can seamlessly engage them in the narrative of the story, okay, with a short 3 to 5 minute pitch. You have to get the characters in your head and take them everywhere you go. Everywhere, 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 all day, all night, 24/7. Your character has to be in your head talking to you. Don't get the Big Mac, get the Quarter Pounder. Don't go to Starbucks, go to the mom and pop coffee shop. You know, what is your character saying right now? Don't play Madden, play Tour of Duty, or, you know. All right. Then you write the script. You use your outline as the map. And you stick to it. Do not stray from the outline. Okay? And you're going to write visually. Visually, you write. Film is a visual medium. And the visual medium predates language. Before we could even speak, we were using basic and grunts and but we could see things, observations, and from those observations, we would make logical deductions and predictions about probabilistic future states. Okay? Stick to that outline until you get to the words fade to black. Once you've done that, you go back, rewrite it. Once you've done that, give it to someone who's going to, or 3 people who are going to give you some solid, honest feedback. You want people to tear it apart. You want them to tear it apart. If they don't tear it apart, don't trust them. Give it to someone else. Because if you don't do it, when you give it to an executive and they do it, they're not going to do it. They're just going to pass. They're going to send you a little note that says thank you, but no thank you. Or you might not even hear from them at all, right? So, and they read, I mean, you guys, you go into an executive office. I remember I was a reader for Denzel Washington, Mundy Lane Productions. And the producer, she had no time to read these scripts. Because you got to think, she's producing for Denzel Washington, right? She don't got time to read a script. So that was my job. And it was an endless supply of scripts. It was a non-stop flow. And when I say non-stop, I mean non-stop. It didn't matter how many scripts I went home with. There was always twice as much to replace it the next day. You know, and that's par of the course in any production company. They need to find good scripts. And the only way they're going to find good scripts is to go through all the bad ones, right? But they don't have time to do it. So they're going to give it to someone who does a reading for them, who does coverage. And that person who does coverage, they're reading, I was reading like script to script to script, like 4 or 5 a day. And it's tedious because the majority of them suck. The majority of them are terrible, you guys. They're just horrible. And it's like, it just tires you out reading it because they have no idea what the craft of writing is about. But then you stumble upon the one that does get it, and it sticks out like a piece of gold. Okay? You want your script to do that. So you write the first draft, rewrite it again, send it to 3-4 people, get some hardcore feedback. I'm talking, you want them to rip it apart, shred it. Then you fix everything, then you give it to them again, shred it, fix everything, give it to and you keep doing that until finally there's nothing left to shred. And that's around 5, 6 or more drafts. Once there's nothing left to shred, you copyright it, and that is your first draft. Okay? Your 5th, 6th, or 7th rewrite is your first draft. Not the impulsive thing that you just rush through to get to page 100. No. Screenwriting is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay? It's a marathon. There are companies out there online that will read your script for you and give you coverage. It's expensive, they charge, but it's worth it. And here's the rationale. Let's say you have a script that costs, I don't know, $10 million. It's a low budget script, $10 million. Do you think somebody's going to spend $10 million on your script if you didn't even take the time to get it proofread or rewrite it to get it up to industry standards? They're not going to have the patience to take you to the side and explain all this to you because they're looking for the writer out there who's already got it. So you want your script to be the best representation of your understanding of the craft of screenwriting. Okay, no typos, no mistakes. You got professional coverage. Matter of fact, you can even submit to them, in addition with the script, the professional coverage. Okay, so that they know, oh, this guy's had someone read it professionally and they like it. All right, I'm going to enjoy reading this. And then I would go back and tell, Denzel's producer, I found one. Actually, I never did that because they all sucked. They all were terrible. It was incredible, you guys. It was like a whole summer, and every single script I read was bad. Bad, bad. Here's a little insight for you. Just to tell you, just because you make it to the big time, you don't stop doing this, all right? One of the reasons why I'm in film is because of John Singleton. And John had already had the Oscar nomination for Boys in the Hood. At the time, I was out of the military and I was at UC Davis and I was writing, directing, and producing stage plays. And John was hella busy. So, getting in touch for me personally especially when he was in production, and he always was. I mean, this man, he was just always at it. But he always made sure someone, his publicist, would always call me and say, Paul, are you home? John wants me to send you the script. And he would send me the script because he would want my notes because I would tear it apart. Okay? So it's a nonstop process. You want to send that script to people you trust. You can't do it in a vacuum alone. You're going to think that, oh, this is good. But you have biases going on, confirmation biases, that cognitive biases that sort of prejudice your judgment. So you got to get an objective second and third opinion. Okay? All right. Buckle down, get your thinking cap on. If you think you want to be a screenwriter, just dive in. It's an extremely rewarding payoff at the end of it. When you're in a theater, right, and the lights go down and it says written by and it's your name. It's a good feeling. And then you hear people laughing and crying. I remember my first play, or not my first one, I did this major play, and I wrote this scene. I intentionally knew I was taking the audience into the darkest place possible. Someone was murdered, a slave on the plantation. And I remember I was in the back of the theater with the assistant, with my producer, and the theater was completely dark. And this is like a stage play, not a theater, not a movie. But during this scene, people started laughing. And it was like, not like a, it was like an uncontrolled laughter. And I was asking the producer, I said, why are they laughing? They're laughing. I'm thinking like, what, did something happen did someone hit a cue or something on stage happen that was funny that I missed? But then I realized the audience was laughing. The audience wasn't laughing, they were crying. They were crying so hard that collectively it sounded like they were laughing. And I remember when the play ended after the third act and people started coming into the lobby, they were walking up to me, you guys, in tears, literally. Tears with handkerchiefs wiping their eyes and just uncontrolled bawling. And they were coming up to me and hugging me, thanking me. Thank you for writing this. Oh my God, thank you. So that came after, I can't tell you how many drafts of that play I wrote before I got into production. So it's a marathon and not a script. Jump into it, and go easy on yourself, but you got to develop thick skin, because when you want someone to shred it and tear it apart, that's exactly what they're going to do. But you can't take it personal. Okay? You got to have thick skin. They're not shredding you or your abilities apart, right? They're not shredding your knowledge of the craft apart. They're simply pointing out the flaws in your design because they are your ally now. You're trusting their input to help you make your script better. All right. See you on the next video, and write something.